So, in the last video, we ended at what to consider before you lobby. So, let's continue. What are some of the things you ought to consider before, as a lobbyist, you go about your lobbying duties? The first thing you would have to look at is the environment. What change are you looking to make? What do you want to see? Are you trying to do women empowerment? Are you trying to fight for children? Or it is a small neighborhood that you're trying to change? What are you looking to make? What change are you looking to make? What is the current policy? What is the policy saying now? Now, the reason this is important is sometimes people rattle on about things that are actually not the case. So, as a lobbyist, somebody or a group of people may come to you and say, "We are in this neighborhood, and can you believe this is what they are doing? This is the current policy that exists, and this is how we are suffering." You go into the actual policy and you realize the policy isn't like that. And what you are looking to change, rather, is not to change a policy, but rather to fight for its enforcement. You understand? So you always have to find out what is the law saying, not what are people saying. What is the law saying about this issue or that issue? Is there anything current? Has anything been said about your issue? Maybe some people have fought or tried to change it in the past and it didn't work. What did they do? What did they not do well? So these are some of the things you would have to look at before you embark on your journey. So try to calm down and not be too excited and try to show that, oh, I'm a lobbyist and I know what I'm about. I'm going to fight for you. Don't worry. Do your homework. Now, whereabouts in the system is the policy? Sometimes you may be contacted to lobby for or against a policy. The policy may actually be in the formulation process. It may not have been passed. Yeah. So it's not law yet. Is it still with the civil servants? Now, when you look at this, one of the things I think we've discussed this already, which is the policy formulation process in Ghana. So, is it still with civil servants? Are they doing consultation where they open it up for the public to share their thoughts and ideas about the policy? Where? Because when you know where it is in the system, you know who you have to engage. And this will make sense to you if you study well the policy formulation process. And you know that at this stage, it is with this person or that person. At this stage, it is with these people. So you know who to talk to. And then again, ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? Sometimes you may be fighting for something too broad when what you actually need is a minor change. So ask yourself, what do I want to be done? Is it that I want this policy to be scrapped totally? Why should it be scrapped? What do I ought to do to ensure it is scrapped? Or maybe it is not the total policy that I do not want, but a clause that may affect the people I am lobbying for. So these are some of the things you have to consider or ask yourself before. And then the people who in government or in the wider policy making setting do you need to contact? Is it the ministers, the advisors, civil servants? You understand? Because knowing who to talk to is important in lobbying. If you waste your time talking to people who do not matter, or you take your time talking to people who, at that policy formulation process, remember, in that journey, their stage is gone, which means they may not have the power to make any more changes to the policy. And you have gone back to be talking to such people, you're wasting your time. So who should you talk to is linked to whereabouts in the system is the policy so that you know who best to lobby. So if it's at step one, you know that okay, I can lobby those in step one, or probably go ahead to those who will be in step two or step three and pre-lobby them so that when the bill gets to them, things will be in my favor. Yeah. So these are some of the things you'd have to consider before you lobby. Yeah, I think we've talked about your approach. How will you convince them that a change is needed? Are you going to do storytelling? Are you going to show them videos of some people in the community or neighborhood who have been affected by whatever it is that you are fighting for, or whether businesses who have been affected? Would you want to show them the businesses' returns and link it to whatever it is that you are fighting for? Show them why there's a need for change. What are some of the things you would need to be able to prove your case? Because remember, the fact that you're a lobbyist or with the fact that you may be their friend does not necessarily mean they will jump at whatever it is that you are bringing and say, oh, you're my buddy, so no problem, whatever it is, even if it is crap, we will fight for you. That's once in a while you'll get something like that, but more often than not, even if the person is your friend, even if the person is your parent or your sibling, you would need to give the person something to go on, something to go with, because the person you are lobbying, the lawmaker or legislator, when he or she sits before other lawmakers, he or she would also have to make sense, yeah, and argue why he or she believes what he or she is saying. So you put friendship aside, you put whatever everything aside, you would have to make sense. So you would have to craft your message. What are you saying? As communicators, you know the importance of your message. Remember the 7 C's: being concise, being clear, all of those things are important over here. Who are your allies? Do you have people who are facing similar problems? You remember the Laugh Canal incident? As it went on, they eventually realized there were other communities that were facing similar problems. If they had known this earlier, they may have roped in these people into the battle earlier. And that may have they fought for about 2 3 years before they got what they wanted. So if they had known of other communities that were facing similar problems, they may have roped all of them in earlier in the process to get quicker or faster results. So getting people who share your in your pain or in your worry really helps. And you know, when politicians or lawmakers realize you have the numbers, it's a big deal, and they often are more willing to have their ear bent. Look at the media. What kind of media campaign are you going to use? Are you going to use a mixture of all of them? Are you going to use one particular medium? It all depends on your situation. Yeah, because if you're fighting for something in Yendi and you probably only need people in Yendi to be aware of this, you may not need to worry yourself to use certain media. Yeah, so you would have to look at your particular or peculiar story or whatever it is that you're fighting for, and then know how to handle media. And then what about the time scales you are working on? Now, do not kid yourself that within a week you may be able to get results. Once in a while, but more often than not, it take weeks, months. Life Canal took 3 years. Some have taken 5 to 10 years. In Ghana, look at how long it took for us to pass the Right to Information Bill. So the timescale will also depend on things like momentum. For instance, if you get a lot of people in a community being worried about the issue and talking about it in on social media or their platforms, the word is out there. Chances are the people you are lobbying will be more well, they'll be easier to convince rather than when it is an emerging issue and they are not under pressure from the public or from other quarters. They are likely to relax for a while. So all of these things come in when you're talking about your timelines. And then asking yourself, are there events that need to be considered? You would realize that it is common for you to see people fight for, let's say, certain communities again in the northern part of Ghana, where it is noticed that a lot of communities have problems with their eyesight. You realize that this is often around the time that, which month is World Eye something month. You realize that that is when you often see them talk about these issues. That's because they are trying to use the event to their benefit. Now, when such events occur, like World Eyesight Day, World HIV Day, World this day or that day, for instance, a lot of eyes are on those issues. So people now pay attention to, oh, so what is the government actually doing about this issue anyway? Yeah, this issue has not been spoken of in a while now. What are they doing? So when your voice is heard in the mix around that time, chances are things are going to go well for you and your timeline may be shorter. And then always be sure to consider the potential aftermath of your campaign. So after this, what would happen? And what does it mean for the people you are fighting for? Yeah. And don't also forget to evaluate and make sure whatever it is that you are fighting for has actually been given to you. Sometimes, even in its implementation, you find there are issues. Like, yes, they put it in the law, but they are not implementing it. So, all of these things are things that you would have to consider during the lobbying process. Now, let us throw some light on contacting your target. Now, when you're contacting your target, you usually use a briefing paper. Now, the word brief comes from, well, the briefing comes from the word brief. So you get the idea. It has to be short and succinct. You should not talk plenty. You are presenting this briefing paper to the policymaker who does not have time. And this policymaker needs to see the briefing paper and then decide whether they are likely to support you or not, or whether they agree with you or not. If you bring a, something like a dictionary or a Bible loaded with facts, it's likely they will toss it somewhere. But when your briefing paper has gone, they have gone through it and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, this is something I'm interested in. This is something I think I can fight for. It is after that that they may even request for more information. You can provide them with whatever information you have. But in the briefing paper, focus on only the key things you would want to talk about. Now, in the next slide, you would see an example of a briefing paper and you have an idea of how this was done. So basically, you have to introduce the issue, describe the organization you are representing. If it's a company or if it's a group of people like Love Canal Homeowners Association, you introduce yourself, the nature of the problem, its background, how it is now. Suggest a solution. Don't tell them the problem and leave it at that. Yeah, if you assume because they know the problem, they would automatically know what ought to be done, you would be shooting yourself in the foot. Maybe their idea may be different from your solution. And then what then happens? They do something you don't really agree with. So offer them the profit solution that you and your people want. And then you provide your contact details for further clarification. So this is how you go about contacting your target as a lobbyist. Yeah, now let's look at the briefing paper and then we'll end the session. Now this is from someone in the Australian National University, Roxanne, and this person was writing to get their library to be a 24-hour access library because as it was then, it was not 24-hour. So they were trying to she was trying to get the university administration to see sense in making the library a 24-hour service. So when you scroll down, it gives a background, university libraries and their importance, and then it descends into the number of visits that their library gets and how it is helping the community, blah blah blah, and then the benefits of having an open library for 24/7 library, access to printing, access to. So you see, they're trying to let you know the benefits and giving models how they can go about giving 24-hour access. This was like about 2 pages. I just brought you the first page for you to have an idea of how it is like. I think it was 1.5 pages, but it was not wordy, it was straight to the point. So anybody looking at this easily understands what is needed and then they take action. So this brings us to the end of this session. We have looked at, well, just ended the briefing paper. We have also looked at some of the things that we ought to consider before we set out to lobby.